Alright, so first things first, turn to a partner for just a second and just talk about something you found that was very interesting about this lesson. Something you learned you didn't know before. You guys can just kind of turn around and talk to each other.
So I don't know about
what did you learn?
The Ben?
I thought video was helpful because I like I think that's the same for me.
It's always like my money that I'm trying to save.
Oh no, I think I was wrong with the
breaking crap.
because to be honest, I
I did it. Really just bad.
Okay, sounds like we had some discussion. A lot of people talking about batteries, lifting cars. We'll go back to that in just a little bit. Let's start with the more, not just get our brains remember what we learned. Let's start with this first. So we're going to work in a shop setting. What things do we need to think about as far as our dress? Yeah.
Closed-toed shoes.
Closed-toed shoes. Okay? So don't wear flip-flops, sandals, that kind of thing when you're in the shop setting. Why? Come back. Yeah?
So pretty much obvious reason, like, when you're dealing with sharp stuff, if something can fall on your shoe, tool, anything like that.
Yeah, it's the simple stuff, really. I mean, a wrench hurts. And it doesn't seem like much, but when you drop it on your toe, it hurts if it's just your bare toe. So wrenches, hammers, parts that you're working with, even just walking through the shop, you could accidentally kick something, rip a nail off the top. I mean, stuff you don't even think about, but it happens if you're not wearing the right shoes. What happens if you drop something that's really heavy, like an engine? Like an engine falls off the lift that you're using.
Then it wouldn't really matter.
Well, so yeah. But have you ever heard of somebody wearing a steel-toed boot and having something really heavy go? What happens?
It depends on the quality of the steel-toed boot. I've had friends where the steel toe, like, because it only covers like the front portion, it's literally just covering the toes, and the supports were bad. It like literally broke off all their toes. So that was a bad quality steel-toed shoe.
Not necessarily. So, believe it or not, it's a good thing. If something that heavy is going to go, let's say you're working on a construction site, like a big old machinery type thing rolls over the top of your foot. What's the alternative? You don't want a steel-toed boot on. It's just going to get crushed in an ankle, right? Tendons ripped, nerves destroyed, bone crushed, muscles just, you know what I mean? Whereas if you wear the steel-toed boot, even though it's still going to hurt you, what happens is that steel toe is going to bend down and it's going to cut your toes off inside your boot. So then what do? They can put it back on, right? You go to the hospital, you don't have to find your toes, they're in there. They cut your boot off, get your toes out, and put it back on, and at least you get your toes back. So it's either way is gruesome and terrible to think about, but which one would you rather have if you could only choose between the two? One of those I'd rather games, you know? I'd rather get my toes back. So it does sound terrible, but yeah, if you have an option, closed-toed shoes for sure, but if you have the option, if you're going to be in the shop all the time, then either steel toe or composite toe. Composite will shatter under extreme stress, but it's better for working on electrical, for example. Steel toe's not very great for working on electrical. Some things to think about. Before I move on, is there anything to think about other than that about your shoes?
I guess the kind of grip.
Yeah. So, what should it say on the bottom of your shoe? If you're going to work in a shop with oils and stuff.
Slip resistant.
Good. So it's either got to say slip resistant or the equivalent, which would be neoprene, because that is slip resistant, or oil resistant, which is the same. And you'll get that when you're buying boots, you'll see that all the time. Just plain rubber soles actually get slicker in oil. Not just because of the oil, but it actually kind of absorbs into the rubber, petroleum products do, and then it makes it more slick. So, alright, now we go to
No same kind of clothing.
no loose clothing, okay. Any reasons why?
Well, I mean, I work construction, but if you were wearing like loose clothing and you're setting something down and your shirt gets caught underneath that thing, well, you either have to rip the shirt out or you have to try and lift the thing back up, and it can just be cumbersome. So I mean, not in a dangerous way, but it catches on things and it's just bothersome.
Okay.
Besides,
So more of an annoyance than,
yeah.
yeah.
Or it like can be kind of risky, like if you're, I guess it's more not really shop, but like PTO shops and stuff, your jacket gets caught in it, it can like rip you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you have loose clothing, you're at risk of getting sucked into anything moving. Right now, the car itself really it's fans and belts. But what about the machinery you're using? If you're using a drill press, if you're using a drill in general, any of those kinds of things can get caught. And lots of people have been hurt that way. I mean, people have been thrown into wood chippers before because their clothing got caught in the wood as they were hooking it in, right? Lots of bad things that happen again. So you got to wear clothing that fits good. I won't say tight, because too tight then you feel restricted to move. But just a nice, good fitting clothing. Okay? What else? Yeah.
No jewelry, right?
Good. So how about necklaces should make sense, right? Necklaces dangle, a tie dangles. A tie is a terrible idea in a shop, which is why I wear a zipper tie to this class. Mostly because it's easy to put on in my car, but at the same time, it's nice to not have to worry about it. Because if a tie is tied and it gets pulled just right, it's going to get tighter, whereas this one's just going to pull down and either break and I can try and pull my head off, whatever, you know? So necklaces should make sense for the same reason. They dangle, you get caught in something. And it's not necessarily that it's going to like kill you. It's just in the moment before the chain breaks on your necklace, your face is going to hit whatever's in front of you. It's going to suck you down really fast. So that's what you should think about. What about bracelets and watches though?
It's not good for electrical stuff, right?
Definitely. They conduct electricity. That's not safe. Anything else?
They could also get like fall into something or get dirty, and usually like bracelets and rings are like a little more like important or expensive or whatever. So just like
Okay, so you're worried about ruining the actual bracelet or watch or whatever. That's true?
On a like kind of practical level, like when you're fixing something and you got something on you, or at least for me, it sometimes can bother me. Like I'll wear a watch or something every now and then, but when I'm trying to do something and I'm using my hands a lot, it can rub away on my wrists, and so it just becomes bothersome. And it's just another component to think about.
It just bothers you. Got it.
I don't know as much about like how, I mean like bracelets and stuff could do this for sure, but like I think of like rings automatically and like girdle your finger, they get caught on something, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like
I think you're
rip
absolutely
the
right.
skin right off.
Well, a bracelet can do it too. Have you
Yeah.
ever worked on a car before? Anybody? Or something like it, like a tractor, anything. Okay. So if you're working on a car or something like it, you've probably done this. You know, and you're like in some weird position, and you're trying to reach this bolt, and then you're to the point now where all I can do is move my fingertips. Okay, so imagine you're in that position, and your bracelet gets like caught, and now you can't get back out. What do you do in that situation? Because you could barely get in there in the first place. So, what, are you gonna wait for somebody to take off all this stuff while you're standing in their way so you can get your arm out? Like, it doesn't really make sense. So really, it's going to come down to maybe just pulling it out as fast as you can and getting hurt. So it gets caught on stuff, and rings happens all the time. And again, we're going to get gruesome. If a ring gets caught on something moving, or if I have to pull because it got caught somewhere that I can't get to, what will it do to my finger?
Pull off the skin.
Pull off the skin. Have you heard of this before?
Yeah.
It's called degloving. So imagine your skin just peeling off of your finger. Happens. It's happened to basketball players, right? Slam down, ring gets caught because they were wearing one. It's either going to break off the finger or break it, but they're still hanging there, or it's going to rip the skin off. It happened to Jimmy Fallon. Do you remember that? Jimmy Fallon, I'm trying to remember how long ago it was, probably 4 or 5 years ago, tripped in his kitchen, caught himself on his counter, and partially degloved his finger all up one side, just tripping in his kitchen. So, think about those kinds of things. And then the electrical one, that one's, has anybody taken off a battery before? So if I'm using a wrench on the battery, what do I have to be careful about? If I have 2 posts here and I'm using a wrench. Yeah, my wrench is long enough to touch from one side to the other. What will I create? Current flow, right? A short circuit. Good. So, a short circuit is going to make my wrench very, very hot. Very, very fast. So in this situation, I would just let go, maybe leave with some minor burns on my hand, but hopefully nothing terrible happened. Battery could have exploded, could have fried some computers on my car, but mostly wrench got hot and hopefully nothing bad happened. However, if I did this and my ring was on while I did that, how fast do you think I'd have to let go before the ring melted into my finger? Faster than you can. It would have melted before you even noticed it melted. And I've seen pictures of the ring after it's been removed from the finger, where it's just raw band around. So, real things. Anything else? Yeah.
Hair up.
Yes, hair. Don't worry about your hair. So those of you with long hair, what are your options?
I think what we can do is to have a bun like on the top. So
Okay, so a bun would be great. Anything else?
maybe a hat.
A hat would be awesome. Anything else?
Cut it.
Cut it. Or one more.
Tuck it in the shirt.
Braid it and tuck it. Good. Or even a ponytail and you tuck it. It just depends on how much you're moving around. Because even if you tuck it in your shirt, it's probably not going to stay that way very long. But yeah, braiding it or putting it in a ponytail and tucking it in your shirt. That works. Alright. Probably most of you don't want to cut your hair. So has anybody ever heard of somebody's hair getting caught before? Tell us about it.
Jet ski.
On a jet ski?
Yeah, she lost her scalp.
Ooh! Was she like going through the trees or something?
No, I don't know if she fell or if somebody else was riding and she was looking.
But she lost, like, partially scalped. Ooh! That's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, I never actually saw it, but at the car track that I work at, we had this girl that she came in the race, but her hair was in the back, and the motor, like it's an electric car, the motor's right in the back. Her hair got caught just that little bit. And from what my manager told me, all he heard was something just screaming. He told me it was bad.
That's terrible. So it could be any type of moving machinery, drill presses, any of those things, and it just pulls you in, or if it's really fast, like these situations, just takes it right out. Either way, very painful. I got 2 stories that happened at my shop, or personally, not to me, but close enough to me. So the first story happened to my cousin, and he had a beard down. He has a beard down to here, and he was using a cordless drill, and he does woodworking stuff. So he was doing something, I don't know. But he went to inspect what he'd done, but he hadn't let go of the trigger yet. And it caught his beard and ripped off like this whole section right here, just red, raw skin. He said it hurt. It looked painful, but he was more upset about the fact that he lost his beard. So he says. The other story is I had a girl in my class a few years ago, and she had fairly long hair, I'd say probably mid-back. And you guys know what creepers are? Mechanics creepers, not the weird people. Mechanics creepers are those things you lay on to go under the car. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. So the girl, she had a truck, and the truck, trucks are already fairly high off the ground, so she didn't have to lift the truck to get underneath it. But it wasn't like a super big truck, so when she was laying on that creeper and underneath, like she had about this much clearance between her face and the frame of the truck. But she was just going under there real quick to look at something, no big deal. But she laid down, her hair was not secure, so when she laid down, it just fanned out on the creeper. So when she kicked herself underneath the truck, it got wrapped up in the wheel. And I don't know if you've ever had something like that, but once it's in, it doesn't matter which way you roll it, it just keeps taking more hair in. So now she's like stuck under this truck. She can't lift up because it's this close to her face. She can't move in any of the directions because it just keeps pulling hair. So she's like screaming under this truck. And we're trying to help her, but I mean, how do you lift a girl, even if she weighed only 100 pounds, how do you lift somebody at this angle, and especially when there's no room to lift them? So there was like nothing we could do. So we could have waited and maybe lifted the truck while she's underneath it, which isn't terribly safe. But she was like, in pain, so we cut it to get her out, and she came back to school with a very different haircut the next day. But I mean, you got to be careful about that kind of stuff. Anything else?
Gloves?
Okay. Good or bad?
Well, if you need them, it's good. Sometimes they could get in the way, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's times for gloves, but I would say the majority of the time you're not going to be wanting gloves. Especially since your number one tool when you're working on cars and stuff is your dexterity on your fingers. Because you're doing really, like I said, you're in weird places and all you can do is move your fingertips. If you're working around machinery that's moving, you shouldn't wear gloves. Because if it catches your glove, it's pulling your whole hand in there. So, there's one more big one we haven't said yet.
Safety glasses.
Good. Safety glasses. What's the most common thing we're trying to keep out of our eyes? Stuff?
Chemical.
What?
I said, like chemical things. Like
Chemicals? Yeah, chemicals could definitely be in there, but is it the most common thing to get in your eye?
Is it just grime?
It's just dirt. Have you ever laid under cars? If you touch anything, stuff just starts falling on your face. You got dirt, rust particles. It's really, really annoying. And if you get something in there and it stays, it's just. If you do get chemicals or something in your eye, you guys should know that it's 15 minutes minimum flush time at the eye wash station to get chemicals. So that way you're not damaging your sight. So the eye wash stations here at BYU we don't have the ones that look like drinking fountain looking things. We have these bottles on the wall, and you grab one and you rip off the top and you squirt it in your eye until it's gone. So, and you'll see them out there in the shop. Alright, we've covered this pretty good. Alright, let's move on. So, 2 most popular topics in this lesson were lifting vehicles and jump starting. Right? Is that what most of you guys talk about? say we were giving somebody a lesson on how to use, let's try lifting. Someone that's never done it, and that might be you, someone that's never done anything with lifting their car, step by step, like what would we say? First step, second step?
Turn your car off.
Yeah, you might have to get that basic. We're not kidding here. Turn off car, good. What else? Have some tools, okay? You can throw that might be up here. Have tools. I like it.
Identify lift points.
That might be right here. Let's put that here. Identify lift points. Okay,
Find a flat surface.
good. So turn it off on a flat surface and make sure it's a good surface. Like, is blacktop a good surface? Asphalt. Hot day, what's going to happen?
Gonna go in.
Yeah, it's going to sink, right? So flat surface, preferably concrete. What are we missing right here? I don't want this thing rolling away on me.
Oh, the chalk.
Even before that.
Oh, it's those thingies you put behind the wheel so it doesn't move.
Before that, you were right. In fact, I'd probably put that like right down here.
Put it in
Emergency
brake?
E-brake and park, right? If it's an automatic, put it in park. And e-brake. Now, this is not necessarily always going to work, because what if your e-brake's on the back tires and you're lifting the back tires? That's not really going to help you. But park would. All right, identify those points. Now what?
Place chapters on the lift points.
Yes, place jack. Good. Can I get under the car now? Let's go back to what you guys were saying a minute ago. What I have to do before I start lifting?
The chalk.
Wheel chocks, good. Put the wheel chocks on. Now we can lift. Can I go into the car now?
You put the jack stands
Good. Place jack stands.
and move the jack.
Place jack stands and land that remove jack. Perfect. I think that's pretty good. Perfect. I think we got it pretty well covered. We're gonna watch a video that I made this year. It's pretty decent. We might skip through some, but it's kind of long. Let's get this thing turned on. By the way, if you go on my channel is just it's Hunter Automotive. If you ever go on my channel, there should be, I think I made them public, I'll double check, but there should be a playlist called Auto 125 and Auto 100, so they're videos specifically for topics in this class. Nope.
Alright, so in this video I wanted to show you how to jumpstart a vehicle using what they call In this video I'm going to show you how to use a rolling floor jack to lift up a vehicle. So to begin, we're going to go over these tools that you'll need. Let's start with the jack itself. You need to make sure that the rolling floor jack you have is rated to lift enough weight for the vehicle that you're lifting. Now remember, most of the time you're not lifting the whole vehicle, you're only lifting a quarter of it or maybe half. So 2 1/4 tons is plenty for most vehicles that you're lifting. But the other thing to worry about is how high does it go? So if you have a really lifted vehicle, it might not be able to reach the frame or things like that you're trying to lift. Okay, so those are some things to consider. Now, rolling floor jacks, believe it or not, don't have wheels to just be convenient. They actually have wheels so that the jack will center itself as it starts to lift. This piece right here is our saddle, and as we start to lift, it's going to get up, and it's going to move, and that means the jack on the base has to roll forward. So you need to make sure that these wheels can roll freely on whatever surface that you're on, because if they can't, what's going to happen is as you start lifting, the saddle is going to try to pull itself out from underneath the vehicle. Okay? So in order to lift it, all you got to do is twist your handle all the way clockwise, and then start pumping, and that will pressurize the hydraulic ram underneath, and you'll see that saddle start to go up. And then when you're ready to go down, you just twist your handle slowly, counterclockwise, and the saddle will go down. And make sure you do that slowly, because when you have the weight of the vehicle on there, it's going to come down pretty quick. Alright, the other tools we'll need are these. These are called jack stands, and I like this style that has the legs coming out. They do sell jack stands that are just straight up and down with the base. They're not as stable. Tripod jack stands are good too. These are totally mechanical, so I'll show you where we're going to put them afterwards, but you raise them up, you make sure both are at the same height, and then once the weight's on there, they're solid. Well, there's no weight on them, you just lift this handle, and they go down. And you need to make sure your jack stands are also rated for enough weight. Each of these jack stands are 2 tons, so they're plenty. The last thing you'll need is something to chock the wheels or to prevent the wheels from rolling. So you could purchase wheel chocks, or you could use a chunk of wood or something. In our situation here, we're going to just be using these bricks, and that'll work just fine. Alright, so now that we know what tools we're going to be using, let's take a look at how we're going to lift a couple different style cars. So this first car is a 2003 Chevy Cavalier, and our second vehicle is a 2004 Ford Expedition. Okay, SUVs, some vans, all trucks have frames underneath them. Okay, they're solid steel, they go pretty much the full length of the vehicle, and anywhere on that frame you can use as a lift point. You can also use rear axles, front axles if it has them. So we're going to get underneath and look at that. On the car, on the other hand, modern day cars do not use frames. Frames are too heavy, and that's really going to draw you down on gas mileage. So instead they use something called a unibody. So you got to be careful where you're lifting on this. I'll show you a couple spots that are really good for that. Something that is underneath a car is a subframe, and the subframe goes underneath the transmission and the engine to support its weight. So we'll start with the car. I'll show you a few places to lift there, and then we'll go over to the SUV, and I'll show you where we can lift there. Alright, so here I am laying alongside of that car, and I'm showing you underneath a couple places that you can lift. We're looking at the back right now, and you can see that if I want to lift the entire back end of this vehicle, I have this nice solid piece that goes across the whole back end. And if I would come in from the back, we can put a jack underneath the wheel right here, and we can lift from there. Okay, so that's a really good spot. And then when we put our jack stands in, which we're going to talk about why we use those in a minute, I'm going to end up putting them on this piece. You can see how it needs to pour it. It's a little bent up, but that's fine. This piece right here is called the pinch weld. All passenger cars have these pinch welds, or at least modern day ones do. And it's where they took the bottom of the car and the top of the car and tack welded it all along. So you can see it goes the full length from tire to tire. And that's a great spot to put your jack stand. Okay? We don't want to go underneath the floor of the car, we're going to put a hole through the car. You want to make sure you're not going under oil pans, transmission pans, gas tanks, anything like that. You're definitely going to ruin something. Okay, so we got solid pieces like this, and we got this pinch weld. Now let's go a little bit more head up to the front of the car. Okay, so we're still looking at pinch weld. Here's on the front. See how solid that is? Okay? But also, this car has this spot over here. Okay, it's right behind the pinch weld. You can see how it kind of bubbles down, some structural strength. And this is actually the work pipe for this car. If you look under the other, in the other manual, that's what it's going to say to do it. So you can do there, or the pinch bar, either one. And then remember I told you there's a subframe, and there's the subframe, that solid black piece with the holes in it. Okay, so this is underneath the engine and transmission. It kind of goes around the whole thing to support its weight. So if I lifted the whole front of this vehicle, I would probably lift on this subframe, probably closer to the front if I can. And then I'll put my jack stands in on this one part right here, or on the pitch light, either way. But make sure you're not getting underneath that oil pan right there, or that transmission pan, because you're going to damage something if you do that. Okay? So now that we know that, let's go look at the SUV and we'll see what differences there are. Okay, so now I'm laying alongside the Ford Expedition. And you can see instantly there's no pitch rods, right? There's nothing here like there was on the car. But a little further in, you can see here's that frame, right? Solid, the full length. Okay, so you can lift anywhere along there. In fact, you can see they've drawn this little, or cut this little arrow out. They can say, hey, here's a good spot to lift. Also in the back end, you can see it's got this rear axle assembly. This one is not a solid rear axle. It uses CD axles everywhere, I don't know if you can see it. But that piece right there, okay, I'll try to point to it on the camera, that piece right there is the differential, and that is a solid piece that you can lift by. So if I can lift the whole back end of this SUV, I put my jack in from the back, under that differential, and then I come in on the side and put my jack stands under the frame right here. Okay? Now on front, kind of the same thing. Right, we still have our frame, you can see that arrow there still. So that's probably around where my jack stands. And then behind the engine, you can see there's another piece of frame that we can lift by. So we come in from the front with our jack, go under that piece right there, and then we put our jack stands underneath this frame. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate how to lift the front end of the car, and then I'm going to demonstrate how to lift the back end of this SUV. And we should have a good understanding of how to do both types of vehicles. Alright, so now we're ready to start lifting the Cavalier. Right? Now, a little disclaimer before we begin on this. You can see that I have this strip of grass that runs the full length of my driveway. So we're not actually going to be able to lift this car, because remember I told you that jack's got to be able to slide. Not to mention we don't want the jack sinking when we start to lift the weight of the vehicle. So I'm not going to actually lift it, I'm just going to show you the steps that I use to do it. So let's go in here, we'll start in the back. You can see we chop the wheels, right, both sides of the back. We don't want this car to roll backwards as we're lifting up the front end, so that'll be good. And the secondary parking brake if you want to. On the front, where the jack is, we position it underneath that front section of subframe that we saw. Just like that. We're starting to lift a little bit so you can see where it's contacting. Okay, now be careful when you're lifting right here. Sometimes this isn't the subframe up here in front. Sometimes it's just a chunk of aluminum that's going underneath the radiator. And if you start lifting there, it's just going to pinch right through the body of the radiator. So be very careful, make sure it's actually solid. Something I always do just to be sure, always listen for sounds as you're starting to lift. If you hear crunching noises and things, you better stop and lower it back down.
That should make sense.
Okay, so if we start lifting that, which we won't, remember you twist your hammer clockwise, pump the handle, and we'll start to go up. But if we were able to get high enough, then we come in and we place our jack stands on those pitch rods. So you can see how the jack stand has like a saddle to it. So we're going to have that saddle position so that pinch wheel is right in the middle. Okay, we have one on each side. You can see the other one over there. Make sure they're both at the same height, so there's no teetering or tilting going on. And then you can go ahead and lower the vehicle onto the jack stands and pull your jack out. You don't need the jack anymore until you're ready to bring it down. Now the reason we use jack stands is because if all you're using is a jack and you're crawling under that vehicle, you're putting your life in the hands of those little tiny seals that hold in hydraulic fluid in the ring. Okay, if they failed, you could definitely die underneath the vehicle, and it has happened before, so be very careful. use your jack stands, okay? Make sure your jack stands are in working order before you use them. Alright, so now I'll show you how to lift the back end of the SUV. Alright, now we're ready to lift up the SUV. You can see that this time we're lifting the back end. So I chopped the front wheels. Applying the parking brake in this situation won't usually help you because most of the time the parking brake is in the rear and that's what we're lifting up. So make sure you're using your chocks. Okay, my jack stand's ready. Now this time that grass strip doesn't go all the way to the back here, so I can actually show you how to lift this. So I got the jack position underneath that differential that we talked about. Okay, so I'm going to start popping the handle. Push it behind to get the tires off the ground. Okay, so we got our tires off the ground. I'm laying here on the side. Let's go ahead and place our jack stand. And you can see the concrete's not very stable right in this spot, so we're not going to go directly under where that arrow is. We're actually going to move up just a little bit. Okay, but it's just fine, because remember that frame is solid everywhere. Raise it up. We'll do the same on the other side. And then we're just going to lower the jack onto those jack stands and take the jack out. Alright, so now that we finished with that, I just want to mention one more thing before we.
Good. Any questions on that? Yeah.
So there's that point where that touches the wheel. I think that's the shock, and that thing that holds it.
The control arm?
The
Hold on. This image?
yeah, the arms that.
Right here?
Yeah, I think in the slideshow it said you could jack the car up, putting it,
Huh?
the jack under that.
Yes. So you could go under here. This is called, on this is my suspension, right? This thing's gonna go up and down. The problem is if I go there, the first, like, however many pumps of my jack, what am I gonna be doing? Am I gonna be lifting the car? Or I'm just gonna be compressing the suspension system, you know? So that's, you can do it, it's fine. It's just that you're gonna lose a lot of movement of your jack trying to do that. But yes, it's a spot that's solid enough that you can lift by. When we do our activity next week in the shop, I want you to be able to lift the front end or the back end of whatever vehicle that you're working with. And so I want you to be able to place the jack in one spot, make one lift, and place both your jack stands at the same time. And just because it saves time, I don't want you to have to lift one corner and then another corner, just because if you were actually doing some of the job, it just takes twice as long. Okay? So that will be your challenge next week. That should show you how to, if you leave next week's class without knowing what a pinch weld is and not touched a pinch weld, then you will have done it wrong. So, there you go. Any more questions on this? Alright. So let's move on to jump starting. How many of you feel like you've done it right your whole life? Yeah?
Well, my Jeep did not hold a charge very well over the winters here, so I had to jump start my Jeep every time I ran it. So
you have some practice?
Well, I have some practice, and watching the video, I've seen basically every form, because people come and they jump my Jeep and they're like, oh yeah, you have to do it like this, and then next week the other person's like, oh no, you gotta do it like this. And so then I looked it up, and I was like, I think you're supposed to do it like this, but everybody does it their own way. Like I had 40, 50 to like other college students, so different people do it differently.
It's true. So there are lots of ways you can hook it up. I mean, there's only one way to hook it up, but as far as order goes, there's lots of ways. But this is the proven method of safety, and any technician will tell you to do it this way. And there's a reason to it. Okay, so let's make this our live battery, and let's make this our dead battery. Where did I make my first connection?
Dead.
Positive on the dead, or negative on the dead?
Positive.
Good. So this is connection number 1. Now the reason I start on the dead car really has to do with the fact that I'm going to end on the dead car. Okay? But as of right now, if I have these jumper cables, right? Jumper cables are usually tied together and you have them split, right? You get 2 lanes on each side, okay? So as long as you're not getting these all mixed up, you're fine. Like untangle it, get them spread out. If they're laying in a puddle, that might not be a smart thing to do. But I'm sure you're smart enough for that. So we stick this one on first. Now, once I've stuck it on there, is there any potential for current flow?
Yeah.
With just the positive effect?
Well, no.
No. So as of right now, like nothing's going to happen. Okay? If, though, I hook up this one right now, is there potential for a problem? Yeah. And the first thing I worry about is, what if these two things are clanking together over on the other side? Then you're creating a short circuit and ruining your battery and maybe some computers on your car. So let's just leave it alone. So just set this off to the side. What's our next step? Positive on the line. Very good. Any potential for current flow now? No. Because you have to have ground and positive and negative. So right now there's still nothing. Okay. What's my next connection? Good. Negative Y. So let's take this up here. This is number 3. Now I have a lot of potential. Tons of potential. All of the potential now is all built up to when I make this last connection. So you want to make sure this thing's not touching something it shouldn't, but other than that, right, we're saving all of that potential energy for this last connection. And why do I not hook it here?
So, when I was looking this up, because I didn't really know, what I came across is that it could kill the battery, or there was like different sites that things like it could destroy the battery or make it more prone to needing to be recharged. Is that true?
As far as ruining it charge-wise, I don't think so. But it is about ruining the battery. What will it ruin? Or in what way will the battery be ruined? Okay, where is the connection first? Where are we going to put it instead?
Grounded.
So this is going to be my engine. I'm going to ground it to the metal of the engine, right? That's connection number 4. Now the reason I do that is because since I built up all this potential energy, what will always happen when I make the last connection? It sparks. I heard someone say that. Right? It will always have spark when I make this last connection. I would rather have the sparks over here than right here. Why? It can explode. Because of why? What chemical? Hydrogen gas is a byproduct of the chemical reaction inside of that battery. So if there's hydrogen gas, and I'm telling you, the situation, like everything would have to be just perfect to make this happen, but it has happened. So we're just trying to prevent that. So, a little pocket of hydrogen gas, you put it there, it sparks, boom. And we're not talking like mushroom cloud explosion here, but we are talking little shards of plastic flying at you and sulfuric acid in your face. And the fact that you probably fried a couple computers when that happened from the electrical surge. So, lots of people jump started wrong. Their car's still fine, they're fine. But if you do it this way, you guarantee that you're not going to have that problem. Alright, yeah.
Does it have to always be the engine? I know it has to be metal and that it shouldn't be the frame, but...
Well, it could be the frame.
Oh.
It's just really hard to get to the frame when you're on top, right?
Yeah.
No, it's a great question. And it's going to become very difficult to find things when you're working on a newer car because what's covering the engine? Plastic, right? Lots and lots of plastic. So if I have that situation where I have tons and tons of plastic, where am I gonna put this? So you can hook it to the body. Like I've seen some cars that actually tell you to hook it on that little hook on the hood where it latches from. It's right there, just hook it there. But for the most part, I try to avoid the body as much as I can. And the reason is because all of the computers on your car are directly grounded straight to the body. So if there were an electrical surge, and it wouldn't take very much, if there were just this tiny electrical surge and it ran through as soon as you made that last connection, it could fry a computer. So I want to be as far away from the computers as possible, and the engine ground is the best for that.
So I got a random bolt in my car, can I use that?
Yeah. Yeah, and next week when we're out in the shop, we'll look at specific places that we might put something. But if you can't find something on the engine, that's fine. And there are places on the body. But if you can avoid the body, try to avoid it. Yes?
If there's like some sort of paint on the body of the car and you hook it up there for that.
Paint's not a great conductor, so try to find an unpainted surface if you can. Bolts work good. You can find a, do you know what the strut tower is? Like if I'm looking at the underside of my hood, my engine and stuff is right here. There's two strut towers right here. There's one bolted nut in the center, and then 1, 2, 3 nuts around, like that. That's the strut tower. You can hook to any of those 3 bolts if they're good enough. But again, it's the body, so if you can avoid it, don't. Or can't. Do. If you can't avoid it, do. Alright. Other things to keep in mind. The battery does have these symbols written on it. And that is what you should be basing this stuff on. Do not base things on color. I've seen cars with both red cables, I've seen cars with both black cables, I've seen cars with yellow cables. I've seen them backwards for some reason because somebody probably had some extra battery cables laying around, and their ones went bad, and one was longer, and they ended up like swapping them because they didn't want to buy new ones. I don't know what it was, but don't ever base things on color. Always base things on the symbols. That way you don't fry the computer, fry the batteries, fry the other guy's battery, all that kind of stuff.
The cables doesn't matter.
The cables don't matter. They're color-coded for your convenience. So just make sure if I put red on positive, I'm going to put red on positive on the other side. But technically, I could put black on positive if I wanted to. You're just going to confuse yourself. So for the most part, red is positive, black is negative, but not on here. Always go on the symbols. Questions on that? Yes?
So, me and my wife's old car just always died all the time. And we would jump start it, but we wouldn't, because my grandma gave me one of those like pod battery things. You just click it out to the car and turn on the car.
A jumper pack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we would just, because the cables were so short, it would just fit on both knobs.
When you're using a jumper pack, it's a little bit different because it has the potential of energy and stuff, but it will only pull out the energy that it needs. So, will it spark? Sometimes, not very often. Most of the time when hooking those on, they're not sparking. So those ones you could probably hook directly on. But you can also put them on the ground of the engine. It will work either way. Good question. Yeah?
The battery, is it always emitting hydrogen gas? Or
Not always. It emits the most when it's charging. So, yes.
I do have a real quick question. So if your battery died, does that mean you have to replace it, or?
If your battery dies, you need to recharge it.
I just need to recharge it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a few months ago, when I turned on my car, it wouldn't run. So we called someone, and that guy just came and he brought a brand new battery for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that we can do those things.
Yeah, it might have been bad. Batteries can only be jump-started and stuff about 6 times, your car batteries.
Oh.
They're not made to drain all the way out and be recharged and drain all the way out and be recharged. Your phone does that. RV batteries do that, but car batteries don't. They're made to let out a huge amount of energy to start the car, and then as soon as this car started, the charging system just kind of brings it back to where it was and then starts running everything on the car for you. So if you run it dead, and then you jump start it, and you do it again. You can only handle that about maybe 6 times before the battery just can't
Well, I'm
do
not
what
sure
it needs
if,
to.
yeah, but the thing is, I was not sure if it was dead, but, so we drove the car the day before that, and then the next day when we tried to like turn the car on, it just won't turn on. It was, and then it would be quiet, like the car just won't turn on. So,
I don't know the situation, maybe it didn't need it, I don't know.
yeah.
But I will tell you, the most common reason for a no start condition on your car, especially if you know you didn't do anything wrong, right? You didn't turn on the radio and run it for like 4 hours. You didn't leave your headlights on. Your dog light wasn't on, right? Doors weren't stuck open. If you didn't do any of that stuff and you know that you treated it right and it started the last time, the number one cause of a no start condition is not the battery. It's the connections on the battery. First thing you check is go twist those connections, make sure they're not loose, make sure the battery's clean, there's no corrosion and stuff on there. That's always what you check first. Tons of times I've gone to help people and they turn the key and all it does is click, or it doesn't do anything, and they pop the hood and I say, start it again, and I just twist the cable a little bit, and it fires right up. So all I need to do is either tighten it or clean it and then tighten it. But, did you have a comment?
Yeah. If you're unsure, I forget which shop in town. It's right next to Claire and D's. AutoZone. They'll check your battery for free, and they'll run diagnostics on it.
Yep.
And for me, I had to jump start my Jeep. I really don't know how many times. Like I would drive to Walmart and it would die, and I have to jump it, and the next day I would have to jump it. But that happened a lot during the winter, and at least what the guy told me, and it made sense to me, was that I wasn't driving it long enough to recharge the battery. And so when I would leave it at night and it got super incredibly cold, for expert, and then I'd try and start it. If it had enough, it barely had enough to get the engine started, and then I'd drive it like 5 minutes and then turn it off, and then I'd have to try it again, and didn't have the charge anymore. So it was just like, I got a new battery because that one was literally jumped. I had jumped it like 15 times. So I got a new battery, and he was just talking to me about how if it does die, the next day once you do get it jumped, run it for like 30, 40 minutes, make sure it's getting charged all the way.
Yep. Good. You gotta remember your charging system, even though it's called a charging system, is not there to charge your battery. It's there to maintain the battery. So if the battery's dead, all it's going to do is slightly raise it up. Now, if you drive it long enough, it'll keep slightly raising it up until it is finally recharged. So the best case scenario, if you don't have a battery charger at home, is like you said, go on a longer drive, let it charge up before you park it. But you should just get a battery charger. In my mind, everyone should have a battery charger at their house, and it doesn't have to be a super fancy one. All it needs to do is be able to put out 10 amps, 2 amps, and that way you can go home and charge it. Okay? So that'd be the best.
Oh, I was saying to go along with the cold weather and the snow thing a couple years ago. Then I was working, and then we had a really bad snowstorm for weeks and weeks and weeks where I live. And then my dad was always the first to volunteer to drive me to work because he's working at home because of the snow and everything. And he wanted to make sure that his car wouldn't stop working, so he would drive me to work in the snow so that he could keep it going, and the other ones were just sitting there freezing. And so I think that if you drive it often enough, then it helps it to not freeze and or stop working.
Yeah. And the battery's freeze point is only good when it's charged. If you have a dead battery sitting in the winter, it's going to freeze. And you'll notice if you look at a battery and it's no longer square and it's bulged on the sides, it's froze. And don't ever try to charge a frozen battery. You need to let it thaw out before you try charging it, or else it'll just get rid of it. Alright. So, next week we'll lift some vehicles, we'll go over jump starting some vehicles, and then the rest of the lab is practicing identifying. So looking at the stickers and figuring out the year, the make, the model, looking at the VIN numbers and all that kind of stuff. So, who wants to bring their cars next week? We probably need 4, if we can. There's one. Two. Anyone else?
Mine is old.
Sorry, what?
Doesn't matter. You got three?
Like,
Who wants to
what
bring
we
their
do
car
to
next
the
week to
car?
class?
Like what we do to the car?
Just look at it.
Okay, I can bring it.
Okay. So why don't you floor plan on it, and then if we need another one or one of you can, we'll use a shop vehicle if we have to. Okay, but what we'll do is we'll still meet in here, but then we'll head out to the shop. If you know where the shop is, it's right outside this door, and then there's some double doors just right there.
So when we bring in our vehicles, I've been in the parking lot, but where do we come in?
Okay, so what you're gonna do is, you guys all know that there's a road behind the Austin building here.
Yeah.
So you go to that road from this side, as soon as you turn onto it, there's an entrance to a teacher parking lot, or a faculty parking lot, right here on the right. And you can either go in and park, or you can follow up this like ramp,
Yeah.
and you'll end up behind this building. There's two shop doors for, we'll be in the first shop.
And then, but where do we go?
I'll be there,
Oh,
I should be there early enough that I'll have the garage door open, I'll tell you where to park.
okay.
Yep. We should be on this side, but if there's too many people, we'll go over on the other side. But we'll come in here, we'll say our prayer and everything, and then we'll head out there and do our project. Don't forget you need to print your lab sheet. You need to have a blank lab sheet to work on. And then remember, you need to email your worksheet by, I don't remember the date on it, double check your date. That worksheet is, you should be doing it this week, because it's due either the beginning of next week or Saturday, I don't remember which way I did that, so double check that.
Is that like on modules or something?
The worksheet is just practice for the lab, it's looking at your own vehicle, on how to identify stuff.
This is the worksheets due this Friday.